Hello and welcome to Cleveland Classic Cinema. Tonight's movie is 1963's Matango, The Fungus of Terror, directed by Ishiro Honda. So what do you think of the new set? Pretty cool, huh? They must have spent, damn, almost $10 doing this. I'm not complaining, though. I like it. You know, I mean, it shows that they're, like, putting some thought into this. Not much, but some. Okay. I should say at the outset of this intro that I'm not a big fan of Japanese horror movies. For that matter, I'm no fan of anime either. You know, to me, anime is just Speed Racer with genitals. The Japanese monster movies, though, were different. Godzilla was, for me, as it was for most people my age, the first taste of Japanese horror I was exposed to as a kid. I found it satisfying. I mean, you know, what kid doesn't like seeing a gigantic lizard-like creature tear an entire city apart, and then get his just desserts at the end of the movie? Like I said, I found it satisfying, but nothing more than that. The endless sequels to this movie, Godzilla's Revenge, Godzilla vs. The Thing, Godzilla vs. Megalon, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, Destroy All Monsters, etc., just got cheaper and more ridiculous the longer they went on. What was even worse was that Godzilla actually became a good guy after like the third movie. Then they came out with Gamera, a flying turtle, for God's sake. And that was pretty much when I just turned and ran. If you've ever seen the original version of Godzilla, not the one AIP released with the added scenes of Raymond Burr, you know that it's an intelligent, thoughtful film in which Godzilla is an allegory for the atomic bomb. In fact, early incarnations of the monster had a mushroom-shaped head, and one of the characters mentions what she went through in Hiroshima. Although the Japanese spelling of the monster's name is Gojira, its correct pronunciation is Godzilla. So, you know, the American name is proper, if not entirely accurate. Matango, the Fungus of Terror, also known as Attack of the Mushroom People, opens with a guy in a nut house that has a really great view of Tokyo, recounting the tale of how he got there. It seems he was one of a group of people on a cruise. A rich businessman, a singer, a writer, a professor, a guy and his girl-next-door type girlfriend, and, of course, the skipper and his first mate. They end up running into a storm and they get stranded on an uncharted island. If this sounds familiar, it's pretty much the same setup as Gilligan's Island, only this movie has more sexual tension in it than that TV show. And I don't remember anyone on Gilligan's Island turning into mushrooms. A personal aside here, if I was going to be stranded on an island with a woman, I would choose Mary Ann over Ginger every time. Ginger was sexy, yes, but she knew it. Mary Ann was much hotter for being innocent, and a girl like that always turns out to be a freak. Getting back to the film, once the castaways land, they spend a good amount of time searching for the island for life. They eventually find an abandoned ship beached on the other side of the island, and upon investigating it, find it pretty much covered with this weird fungus. After cleaning it up, which must have been one hell of a job, I mean, this stuff is literally everywhere and it looks disgusting, they move into the ship and use it as a base. Speaking for myself, you never get me on the board. You know, I mean, fungus is gross enough as it is, but scraping that crap off every surface in the place and having it blow spores all over me would make an even bigger mess because I'd be projectile vomiting the entire time. Once they settle in, the inevitable fighting over the women commences, but that thankfully gets settled soon enough when we get down to the creep factor stuff. Shadowy, misshapen figures start peeping in the windows and stalking the survivors, scaring the hell out of everyone and causing whoever is holding the weapon they found on board to blow off a couple dozen shots in rapid order, which is odd because I could swear it's a bolt-action rifle. A shot that he manages to scare the sand into flying into the air before he even pulls the trigger. As time passes and the food begins to run short, people start eating the mushrooms growing everywhere, and well, far be it for me to spoil the movie for you, although if you can't figure out what happens to everyone just by the title of the movie, you're not paying attention. I was expecting the usual tackiness of a Japanese monster movie when I started watching this, and at first it didn't disappoint. There's a song of sorts near the beginning to showcase the singer's talents and the usual exposition introducing the characters, including a flashback within a flashback. But once they got to the derelict freighter, the movie changed things up. The creep factor came in at that point and stuck around for the rest of the film, although I have to admit that I began to itch for the fast-forward button a few times until I realized that this is less of a horror movie than it is an examination of the way people change under duress. In this case, starvation and deprivation. The film is shot beautifully and the production design is excellent, and I honestly cannot continue in this vein. In my research on the movie, I kept running into all of these reviews talking about how wonderful it was, and I watched it a second time in an attempt to see what I obviously missed the first time I watched it. The second viewing didn't help. I saw the same thing I saw the first time. A slow-moving, almost glacial Japanese horror film that had a nominal creep factor in a few scenes but was ultimately unsatisfying and dull. It is shot beautifully and has excellent production design, like I said, but it was still slow-moving and dull. And the fact that the first mushroom person you see looks almost exactly like Pickle Puss from the Daffy Duck cartoon, The Great Piggy Bank Robbery, didn't help much. Now, I have no doubt that I'm limited in some way for not having seen what so many others did in this movie, but as I've said so many times before, my reaction to movies in general is more visceral than cerebral. So my inability to see the deeper meanings, or whatever the hell it was these other people saw in the movie, just flew right the hell over my head. And just to prove that I'm not a snob, I feel the same way about Truffaut and Bergman movies. Now, it's time for the bios, but I'm only going to do one for the director, Ishiro Honda. The reason for this is twofold. First of all, there's not a whole lot of biographical information on the cast of this film. And secondly, I just about break my spine trying to pronounce the names of the other films they appeared in, since they're mostly Japanese titles. Ishiro Honda was born on May 7, 1911 in Yamagata, Japan. His original aim in life was to be an artist, but that changed in his teens when he became interested in cinema. Honda directed 58 movies in his long career and was a lifelong friend and sometime collaborator with the great director Akira Kurosawa. He was drafted into the Japanese Army and spent about 8 years in military service, a portion of that time spent in a Chinese POW camp. When he returned to Tokyo, he joined Toho Studios, where he met special effects man Ijai Tsuburaya. The two of them worked together on several films before teaming up on what is probably their most remembered film, 1954's Godzilla. Honda also directed 1956's Rodan the Flying Monster, 1957's The Mysterians, 1961's Mothra, and 1962's Varan the Unbelievable. A recurring trademark of Honda you see in a lot of his movies, especially his giant monster movies, are scenes where people are overwhelmed by an onrush of panicked crowds that grew from a fear of just such a thing happening to him while he was stationed in China. Ishiro Honda died from respiratory failure on February 28, 1993 in Tokyo, Japan. Akira Kurosawa delivered his eulogy. There are a number of interesting things about this film that are worth sharing. There'll be spoilers here, me hearty, so if you want to avoid them, turn down the sound and or leave the room for a minute or two. As usual, I'll wait. Okay, one of these things is the fact that once everyone in the movie finally gives in to their hunger and gets sick of eating tubers and turtle eggs, they dig into the mushrooms. The men turn into mushroom people, but the women just get more attractive. The reason for this is that when they were hashing out the makeup required for the transformations, Honda decided that rather than have all the women get all, fungused up, they should become more attractive to seduce the men into eating the mushrooms. The mushrooms themselves, well, the ones the actors ate anyway, were made of rice paste colored with food coloring and flavored with sugar. For the scenes where you can actually see the mushrooms growing on camera, the industrial waste products for making nylon were used. There were two liquids that, when mixed together, expanded quickly, forming what came to be known later as styrofoam. Using mostly corned beef cans, which in Japan were smaller at the top than at the bottom, Honda timed the shots and had the crew quickly pour and mix the liquids together in the cans and then run out of the shot. The styrofoam forced up and through the small-mouthed cans formed a perfect mushroom shape as it solidified in real time so the actors could walk through a scene as they grew. It's an amazing effect and it looks perfect. This is one of the things I really miss about practical effects as opposed to digital effects. While both of them take talent, I mean, there's no denying that. Creating things like that are where the term movie magic really lies for me. When you take ordinary things, or in this case, industrial waste, and figure out a way to create an illusion with it, I mean, my God, it's just imagination being used to its full potential. Understand, I'm not denigrating digital effects, but figuring out how to create things like that with your hands and your head is an art that I hope will never fade away as so many others have. Okay, rant's over. Right now, it's time to sit back, relax, and enjoy Attack of the Mushroom People, right here on Cleveland Classic Cinema.